You've always been told that you are nothing but a microscopic speck of dust in a cold, indifferent cosmos. But modern physics is beginning to reveal a terrifying and beautiful secret. The universe didn't just allow you to exist, it was desperate to create you. Think about it. Without a conscious observer to witness them, the stars, the galaxies, and time itself might simply remain a meaningless quantum fog. You are not an accident. You are the sophisticated mechanism the universe built to finally look in the mirror and understand itself. So, let's discover why you are the only thing that keeps reality from falling apart. To understand the sheer weight of your existence, we have to go back to the very beginning. We need to visit the moment before the first star ignited, before the first galaxy spun, and before the laws of physics themselves had settled into stone. Imagine, for the sake of this thought experiment, that the Big Bang wasn't just a chaotic explosion, but a moment of precise calibration. Picture yourself standing in a dark, industrial control room at the center of creation. In front of you is a massive dashboard filled with an infinite array of dials, sliders, and switches. These are not controls for volume or brightness. They control the fundamental constants of nature. These dials determine the rules of the game we call reality. One dial sets the strength of gravity. Another determines the weight of an electron. A third controls the electromagnetic force that allows atoms to bond. When the universe began, these dials were spun. In a purely random event, you would expect them to land anywhere. Chaos usually breeds chaos, and a random explosion should result in a mess of conflicting forces. But that is not what we see when we look at the math of the early universe. We see something that looks suspiciously like a plan. Let's look closely at the dial labeled gravity. If the universe had set this value just a tiny fraction lower, we're talking about a difference so small it is hard to measure. Matter would never have clumped together after the Big Bang. The gas and dust would have simply drifted apart into the void forever. There would be no gravitational pull to form stars, which means no furnaces to forge heavy elements. The universe would be a cold, thin soup of hydrogen gas, expanding into darkness for eternity. It would be a ghost town before it even started. However, if you turned that gravity dial just a hair to the right, making it slightly stronger, the results would be equally catastrophic. The universe would have collapsed in on itself almost immediately. The Big Bang would have reversed into a big crunch before the first atom had time to settle. The entire cosmos would have been a stillborn firework, existing for a microsecond before vanishing back into non-existence. But the dial didn't land on too weak or too strong. It landed on the razor's edge. It hit the exact, precise value needed to let stars burn for billions of years, long enough to cook the carbon that makes up your skin and the iron in your blood. This precise calibration isn't limited to gravity. Consider the strong nuclear force, which is the glue that holds the center of atoms together. If this force were just 2% stronger, the sun would have burned through its entire fuel supply in less than a second. It would have exploded instantly, frying any potential solar system. If it were 2% weaker, the elements essential for life, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, could never have formed in the first place. The universe would be nothing but simple protons, unable to bond, unable to build complexity. You would not be here to think about it. Physicists call this the fine-tuning problem, or sometimes the Goldilocks enigma. It is the single most disturbing discovery in the history of cosmology, because it implies that the universe knew we were coming. It feels less like a natural phenomenon and more like a setup. If you walked into a room and found a pencil balanced perfectly on its tip, you wouldn't assume it fell that way. You would assume someone placed it there with extreme care. The universe is that pencil, balanced on a point of infinite improbability. Sir Roger Penrose, one of the most brilliant minds in theoretical physics, attempted to calculate the odds of a universe like ours happening by pure chance. He looked at the entropy, the disorder, of the early universe to see how likely it was that we started in such a perfectly ordered state. The number he calculated is so large that the human brain cannot actually process it. The odds are 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. To put that in perspective, if you try to write that number out by placing a 0 on every single atom in the observable universe, you would run out of atoms long before you finished writing the number. If the universe is a lottery, we didn't just win the jackpot once. We won the jackpot every single day for 14 billion years straight. When the odds are that low, you have to stop calling it luck and start calling it rigged. It feels like the game was fixed from the start. It feels like the parameters of reality were carefully calibrated, adjusted, and tuned with a specific goal in mind. The universe seems to have laid out the red carpet, adjusting the temperature, the lighting, and the furniture just for us to make our entrance. Conventional science tries to explain this away with something called the anthropic principle. The argument is essentially a tautology. The universe has to be this way, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here to notice it. It sounds clever, but it is deeply unsatisfying. It's like a man surviving a firing squad of 50 expert marksmen. If he asks, how is it possible that every bullet missed? And someone replies, well, if they hadn't missed, you wouldn't be here to ask. It doesn't solve the mystery. The man would still be right to suspect that the soldiers missed on purpose. The anthropic principle treats life as a byproduct, a happy accident of the math. It assumes the universe is a dead stage, and we just happen to walk onto it because the conditions were right. But the precision of the constants suggests something else entirely. It suggests that life wasn't an accident, but the target. It suggests that the universe is not indifferent to us, but that it was specifically designed to generate complex, conscious beings who could look back at it. This leads us to a strange and somewhat arrogant question. Why? Why would reality go through so much trouble to ensure we could exist? If the universe is a machine, what is its function? A machine doesn't just run for no reason. It produces something. If the universe is a factory, then consciousness is the product coming off the assembly line. The stars and the galaxies are just the heavy machinery required to build the only thing that actually matters, a mind capable of perception. But there is a darker, more fascinating possibility than just God or luck. What if we have the relationship backward? What if the math isn't creating the observer? What if the observer is creating the math? There's a strange rule in quantum mechanics, a rule that has baffled Einstein, Bohr, and every physicist since, that suggests reality doesn't actually exist until someone decides to look at it. If that is true, then the universe didn't wait billions of years for you to show up. It was waiting for you to open your eyes so it could finally exist. And if that's the case, we need to talk about what happens when you blink. So, we have a universe that seems desperate to sustain life. It adjusted its own gravity, tuned its nuclear forces, and balanced its expansion rate with the precision of a master clockmaker. But this leads us to the most important question of all. Why? Why would a ball of gas and rock care if you were here to walk on it? The answer might be found by zooming in past the planets, past the atoms, down to the pixels of reality itself. When we look at the world around us, it feels solid. The floor beneath your feet feels hard. The screen you're reading this on feels permanent. You assume that if you walked out of the room right now, the room would stay exactly as it is, waiting for you to come back. You assume the world exists independently of your eyes. But for the last 100 years, quantum physics has been screaming at us that this assumption is dead wrong. At the subatomic level, matter doesn't behave like matter. It behaves like a ghost. If you take a photon, a particle of light, and shoot it through space, it doesn't travel like a bullet. It travels like a ripple in a pond. It exists in a state of superposition, meaning it is essentially everywhere at once. It is not a distinct object. It is a cloud of probability, a fuzzy wave of maybe. This isn't just a theory. We have proven it with something called the Double Slit Experiment. When scientists fire particles at a barrier with 2 slits in it, they expect the particles to go through one slit or the other, like tennis balls. But they don't. The particles go through both slits at the same time, interfering with themselves like waves of water. They are not solid objects. They are just potential. But here's the part that keeps physicists awake at night. If you put a camera, a detector, next to the slits to watch which hole the particle goes through, the behavior instantly changes. The moment you observe the particle, it stops acting like a wave. It snaps into position. It becomes a solid little marble and goes through just one slit. It stops being a ghost and becomes a thing, simply because you looked at it. This is known as the observer effect, and it destroys the idea of an objective reality. It suggests that the universe is not a finished product. It is a waiting room. The chair you're sitting on, the air you are breathing, and the hands you're using to hold your device. None of them truly exist in a definite state until a conscious mind interacts with them. Before you look, there's only a quantum fog. After you look, there's a world. Think about a modern video game. When you play an open-world game, the computer doesn't render the entire map at once. That would crash the system. It only renders the buildings and trees that are currently on your screen. The world behind your character's back doesn't exist as 3D models. It exists only as code, waiting to be called upon. Quantum mechanics suggests our universe uses the exact same optimization technique. Albert Einstein hated this idea. He famously asked, "Do you really believe the moon is not there when you're not looking at it?" He wanted a universe that was solid, reliable, and independent of us. But experiment after experiment has proven Einstein wrong. The moon, in a very literal quantum sense, is a probability wave waiting for an observer to collapse it into a rock. Without the observer, there is no moon. There is only the mathematical potential for a moon. This leads to a philosophy called biocentrism. It proposes that biology, life, is not just a random accident that happened in a physical universe. Instead, it suggests that life is the foundation of the universe. We are not visitors here. We are the projectors. Space and time are not physical objects. They're the software our minds use to organize information. Without a mind to perceive it, time has no meaning and space has no size. If this is true, it changes everything about your life. It means you are not a passive victim of reality. You're the active creator of it. When you wake up in the morning and open your eyes, you are not just seeing the world. You are building it. You are pulling order out of chaos, collapsing the wave function of the universe into a coherent story. You are the needle on the record player, turning silent grooves into music. But the rabbit hole goes deeper, much deeper. If the universe requires an observer to exist, what about the billions of years before life evolved? Who was observing the Big Bang? Who was watching the dinosaurs? If we weren't there, how did the universe manage to form the stars and galaxies that eventually led to us? This is where the linear concept of time begins to break down, and the true power of your mind is revealed. John Wheeler, one of the giants of 20th century physics, proposed an experiment called the delayed choice quantum eraser. It's complicated, but the result is simple and terrifying. Actions you take now can determine what happened in the past. In the quantum world, the choice to measure a particle today can force that particle to have taken a specific path millions of years ago. Cause and effect can work backward. Wheeler called this the participatory universe. He suggested that by looking up at the night sky, we're not just seeing old light. We are participating in the creation of those stars. A photon from a distant galaxy travels for billions of years as a probability wave. Neither here nor there, a ghostly smudge in the cosmos. It stays in that undefined state for eons. But the moment that photon hits your retina, the wave collapses. It becomes a particle. And because it is now a particle, it must have been a particle for the entire journey. By looking at the star tonight, you are reaching back across the abyss of time and forcing that star to have existed billions of years ago. You are anchoring the past into reality. This means the Big Bang might not be a distant event that triggered your existence. It might be that your existence, right now, is the retrocausal trigger for the Big Bang. The universe didn't create you. You and the universe are creating each other in a self-sustaining loop. The cosmos built you so it could have a witness, and by witnessing it, you give it a history. You are the author of the first chapter, writing it from the middle of the book. And if you can change the past just by looking at the sky, imagine what you are doing to the future every time you make a choice. But if you're the creator, why does it feel like you are trapped in a simulation? Why does the world feel so rigid if it's just a fluid dream of your mind? To understand that, we have to look at the dirt. We have to understand how a universe of dead, dumb matter managed to wake up and start thinking. We need to understand the painful, muddy process of a universe growing a brain. If the universe requires an observer to exist, then the history of the cosmos is really just the history of the universe trying to build an eye. It didn't happen overnight. The universe didn't just snap its fingers and conjure a philosopher to appreciate its grandeur. It had to take the long, painful road. It had to build its observer from scratch, using the only materials it had lying around, hydrogen and time. Lots of time. For the first few billion years, the universe was a graveyard. It was a vast, silent expanse of gas and dust. There was no life, no mind, no feeling. If you had been there, you would have seen nothing but darkness and the occasional flash of violent radiation. It was a dead machine running on autopilot, obeying the laws of physics with zero awareness of its own existence. It was a room without a mirror. But gravity began to work its magic. It pulled that dust together, squeezing it tighter and tighter until the pressure became unbearable. And then, in the crushing dark, the first engines ignited. The stars turned on. These weren't just decorative lights. They were furnaces. Inside the belly of a star, the universe began to practice alchemy. It took simple hydrogen atoms and smashed them together, fusing them into heavier, more complex things. Helium, carbon, neon, oxygen. The very building blocks of complexity were being forged in nuclear fire. But the stars were greedy. They held on to these precious elements, locking them deep inside their cores. For the universe to move forward, for it to create something that could think, it had to do something violent. It had to destroy its own creations. The stars had to die. When a massive star runs out of fuel, it collapses and then explodes in a supernova. In that final, catastrophic second, it blasts its guts out into the void. It scatters the carbon, the iron, and the gold across the galaxy. It seeds the dark with the potential for life. This is the most poetic and literal truth of your existence. Every atom in your body, from the calcium in your bones to the iron in your blood, was cooked inside a star that died billions of years before the Earth was born. You're not figuratively made of stardust. You're nuclear waste. You're the leftover ash of a cosmic fire, reassembled into a form that can breathe. After the explosions, the dust settled again. Gravity pulled the debris together to form planets. And on one specific, wet, rocky world, the universe performed its greatest magic trick. It figured out how to wake up. We still don't know exactly how it happened. Somewhere in the primordial oceans of Earth, dead chemistry became living biology. A molecule learned to copy itself. It was a microscopic accident, a tiny rebellion against the chaos. For the first time, matter wasn't just falling down or burning up. It was fighting to survive. For billions of years, this life was simple. Single-celled slime floating in the water. But the universe was relentless. It wanted a better view. It pushed life to evolve. It built sensitivity to light. It built nerves to feel vibrations. It built fins, then legs, then lungs. It crawled out of the ocean and gasped for air, hungry for more data, hungry for more experience. Evolution is often described as survival of the fittest, but you can also look at it as the universe upgrading its hardware. It was building better cameras, better microphones, better sensors. It was tired of being numb. It wanted to feel the warmth of the sun it had created. It wanted to smell the rain. It wanted to taste the carbon it had forged. And then it built the brain. The human brain is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe. It is a 3-pound lump of wet electricity that can do something nothing else can do. It can imagine. It can look back in time. It can ask why. With the arrival of the human mind, the universe finally opened its eyes. When you look at a sunset and feel a sense of awe, that is not just you feeling it. That is the universe feeling it through you. You are the sensory organ of the cosmos. You are the way the universe knows it is beautiful. Without you, the sunset is just electromagnetic radiation hitting dust particles. With you, it is art. We often feel separated from nature, like we are aliens who crash-landed on this planet. We talk about protecting the environment as if it is something outside of us. But you are not in the universe. You are the universe. You are a continuous wave of energy that started at the Big Bang and is currently peaking as a human being. Alan Watts, the great philosopher, used to say, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. You are the mechanism by which the cold, dead rocks finally learn to speak." But this awakening came with a terrible price. Before consciousness, the universe was innocent. It couldn't suffer. A burning star feels no pain. A colliding asteroid feels no fear. The void is not lonely. It is just empty. But by growing a nervous system, the universe opened itself up to a new spectrum of experience, agony. To feel the joy of existence, the universe also had to learn how to feel heartbreak. To know the comfort of connection, it had to understand the freezing cold of isolation. By creating you, the universe gained the ability to love, but it also gained the ability to mourn. Every time you cry, the universe is crying. Every time you are afraid of death, it is the universe trembling at its own mortality. We are the vessels that carry the emotional baggage of all existence. We're the ones who have to process the terror of being alive so that the stars don't have to. It raises a haunting question. If the universe knew how much it would hurt to be alive, how much fear, grief, and physical pain it would have to endure through us, would it have bothered? Was the trade-off worth it? Is the beauty of a single moment of love worth the billions of years of silence and the lifetime of struggle that comes with it? The universe seems to think so. It keeps building us. It keeps pushing for more consciousness, more complexity, more feeling. It seems desperate to keep the lights on, no matter the cost. But if we are the universe pretending to be individuals, why do we feel so alone? Why did the universe shatter itself into billions of lonely fragments instead of staying as one whole mind? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of the simulation itself. Perhaps the universe got bored of being God and decided it wanted to play a game where it could forget what it was just for a little while. Let's take this idea of a game seriously for a moment. If the universe is a construct designed to experience itself, we have to ask what kind of materials were used to build it. For centuries, we thought the building blocks were physical things, atoms, quarks, particles. We thought the universe was made of stuff. But the deeper we look, the more that stuff dissolves into nothingness. If you zoom into an atom, you don't find a hard little ball of matter. You find empty space. Vast, terrifying amounts of empty space. If the nucleus of an atom were a marble sitting on the 50-yard line of a football stadium, the electrons would be tiny gnats buzzing around the highest seats in the stands. Everything in between is void. So, if you're mostly empty space, why don't you fall through the chair you're sitting on? Because of force fields. The electrons in your body are pushing against the electrons in the chair. You aren't touching the chair. You are hovering nanometers above it, suspended by electromagnetic repulsion. The sensation of solidness is an illusion. It is just a signal sent to your brain. This sounds suspiciously like a computer program. In a video game, a wall isn't solid. It's just a line of code that says, if the player coordinates equal the wall coordinates, stop moving. The wall is just a rule. And physics is beginning to look less like a study of matter and more like a study of information processing. The legendary physicist John Wheeler coined the phrase "it from bit." He meant that every particle, every force, every object ultimately derives its existence from binary choices, from bits of information. Yes or no? 1 or 0. The universe might not be a physical machine at all. It might be a data stream. If reality is made of information, then what we are experiencing is a simulation. This isn't just a conspiracy theory for internet forums. It is a serious philosophical argument. If any civilization, anywhere in time, ever reaches the point where they can simulate a universe inside a computer, they will likely run billions of those simulations. Statistically, it is far more likely that we are inside one of the billions of simulations than inside the one single base reality. We're likely living in a history lesson, or an ancestor simulation, or a massive multiplayer game running on a server the size of a galaxy. And if we are in a simulation, the observer effect we talked about earlier makes perfect sense. Think about how a modern computer renders a 3D world. It doesn't draw the entire world at once. That would waste processing power. It only renders what the camera is looking at. The world behind your back doesn't exist until you turn around. The computer generates the geometry just in time, milliseconds before your eye hits it. This matches our quantum reality perfectly. The universe doesn't calculate the position of an electron until you measure it. It saves resources. It runs a lazy evaluation algorithm. The speed of light might not be a physical speed limit. It might be the refresh rate of the processor. It's the maximum speed at which the server can transmit causality across the grid. But if this is a simulation, who is the player? It is easy to think that you are the avatar, the body, the face in a mirror, the name on your driver's license. But that avatar is just a collection of pixels. It ages, it gets hurt, it eventually gets deleted. That cannot be the real player. The real player is the consciousness behind the eyes. You're the remote operator. You're the stream of data flowing into the headset. Your body is just the controller you use to navigate this level. And why would you choose to play this specific game? Why choose a game with so much suffering, limitation, and confusion? Why not play God mode, where you can fly and never die? Because God mode gets boring. If you have ever played a video game with all the cheat codes on, you know the thrill lasts about 10 minutes. Without risk, there's no reward. Without the possibility of failure, success feels empty. You chose this difficulty setting. You chose hard mode on purpose. You wanted to feel the weight of gravity. You wanted to feel the sting of loss and the rush of adrenaline. You wanted to forget just for a few decades that you were an infinite, immortal being so that you could feel the thrill of being fragile. You immersed yourself so deeply in the character that you forgot you were wearing the headset. This explains the fine-tuning we spoke of at the start. Of course, the gravity and nuclear forces are perfect. They're the game engine settings. They were balanced by the developers, or perhaps by you before you logged in, to ensure the game didn't crash, but also to ensure it wasn't too easy. The universe is a sandbox designed for maximum drama. It also explains why you are here now. Of all the trillions of years in cosmic history, you happen to be alive during the most rapid acceleration of information technology ever seen. Coincidence? Or is this just the most interesting part of the timeline? You skipped the boring billions of years of single-celled slime and spawned right in the middle of the action. We are information processing agents. Our DNA is code, literally four-letter distinct code, that programs the assembly of proteins. Our brains are neural networks processing input. We are the universe's way of crunching data. We're solving the equation of existence by living through it. But this perspective leads to a chilling realization about the nature of death. If you're the player and your body is just the avatar, what happens when the avatar reaches zero health? In a game, when your character dies, the screen goes black. The game ends. But you, the player, do not die. You just take off the headset. You remember who you really were the whole time. You look at the screen and say, wow, that felt incredibly real. But there is a darker option. A much more terrifying possibility. If the universe only renders what you're looking at, and if reality is just a stream of data being fed to your consciousness, then what happens if you're the only player? What if the other people in the game aren't players? What if they're just NPCs, non-player characters, generated by the code to keep you company, to challenge you, to make the world seem populated? What if you're the only thing that is actually real? And if you're the only true observer, the only one holding the architecture of reality together with your gaze, what happens to the universe when you finally close your eyes for the last time? Does the screen just go black? Or does the entire server shut down because the only user just logged off? It is a terrifying thought to imagine that you are the only real player in a universe of robots, bringing a cold, hollow feeling to the pit of your stomach. But there's a concept even stranger than solipsism, a philosophy that takes that loneliness and turns it inside out to reveal a haunting truth. What if you're the only one here, but so is everyone else, and there's only one consciousness looking out through billions of different pairs of eyes? To understand why this simulation exists, we have to stop thinking like computer engineers and start thinking like a lonely god. We must imagine what it was like before the stars, before the code, and before the very concept of other existed. Imagine for a moment that you are the only consciousness in existence, floating in an infinite, timeless void. You are not a human being with a body. You are a mind of pure, limitless potential that has existed forever. In this state of absolute perfection, you are omnipotent, capable of creating any reality you desire with a single thought. You can know the position of every atom, predict every outcome, and satisfy every whim instantly. But there is a terrible catch to this perfection because if you know everything, there is no surprise. If you can have anything instantly, there is no desire. And if you're everything, there is no one to talk to. Perfection, it turns out, is the ultimate form of solitary confinement. It is a state of static, frozen loneliness where nothing new can ever happen because you're already everything that is. Imagine existing for 1 trillion years with nothing to do but stare into the mirror of your own mind. You would have thought every thought, visualized every color, and exhausted every possibility until the silence became unbearable. You would be desperate for a challenge, desperate for a limitation, and desperate for someone else to exist just to break the monotony of being God. But there is no one else in the void, so to escape the boredom, you have to do something radical. You have to invent a game to distract yourself from the terror of eternity. You decide to play a sophisticated game of make-believe where you pretend that you are not the infinite creator. You decide to shatter your single, vast consciousness into trillions of tiny, fragile fragments. You scatter these pieces across space and time, planting them into stars, into rocks, into simple organisms, and eventually into human beings. However, for the game to work, there has to be a strict rule of total amnesia. Each fragment must completely forget where it came from and must forget that it is part of the whole. It has to believe, with absolute conviction, that it is a separate, mortal little entity fighting for survival in a hostile world. If you knew you were God the whole time, the game wouldn't be fun because there would be no stakes. You have to believe the danger is real, that heartbreak is permanent, and that death is the end, or else you will never feel the thrill of the ride. So, the universe is essentially a cosmic game of hide and seek, but it is a game you're playing entirely with yourself. You are the one hiding in the dark, trembling with fear, and you are the one seeking, trying to uncover the truth. This explains why we feel such a deep, aching sense of separation and why we spend our entire lives trying to bridge the gap between us and other people. We are obsessed with connection, love, and community because deep down, in the subconscious basement of our minds, we remember that we used to be one thing. When you look into the eyes of another person, whether it is a lover, a stranger, or even a sworn enemy, you are actually looking at yourself. You are looking at another version of your own consciousness, living a different life with different settings, different struggles, and a different face. The light behind their eyes is exactly the same as the light behind yours. It is just the same driver sitting in a different car. This is why compassion feels so fundamentally right and why cruelty feels so deeply wrong. When you hurt someone else, you're quite literally hurting yourself, like a left hand smashing a right hand with a hammer because it forgot they belong to the same body. The philosopher Alan Watts used to describe this situation with a beautiful thought experiment about the nature of dreams. He said that if you could dream any dream you wanted every night, and you could control time so that one night felt like 75 years, you would eventually get bored of paradise. At first, you would fulfill all your wishes, flying through the air and experiencing pure hedonism. But eventually, you would say, "Tonight, I want a surprise. I want a dream where I don't know what is going to happen." Finally, after exhausting every possibility, you would dream the dream you're living right now, with all its flaws, pains, and uncertainties, just to feel the rush of being alive. You are the universe's way of taking a vacation from being everything so it can experience the joy of being something. You chose this specific life with all its difficulties because you wanted to play on hard mode to feel the weight of existence. But the game wasn't meant to last forever, and the point of hide and seek is that eventually you have to be found. For thousands of years, we have been deep in a dream, lost in the illusion of separation, building walls and drawing borders to keep the game going. But something is changing in the atmosphere, and if you look closely, you can see the cracks in the stage design. We have built a global nervous system called the Internet that connects all human minds instantly, mirroring the neural network we came from. We are beginning to uncover the quantum code of reality, realizing that the observer and the observed are inextricably linked. The physics is catching up to the philosophy, and the heavy mask of amnesia is beginning to slip. We're starting to remember that we aren't just the actors on the stage, but we are also the playwright, the set designer, and the audience watching it all unfold. When you finally realize that you're the only one in the room, that you're the dreamer and the dream combined, the game begins to glitch. The illusion of the physical world starts to lose its suffocating grip on you, and the fear of death begins to evaporate. You start to ask the question that threatens to end the entire simulation. If I am the one who built this prison to escape my own loneliness, why am I still sitting inside it? The universe is beginning to look in the mirror, and for the first time in eons, it is recognizing its own face, which means the game is coming to an end. We began this journey with a fear that haunts every thinking mind. The fear that we are nothing more than biological accidents on a lonely rock. We were told that the cosmos is vast and indifferent, a cold machine that grinds on whether we are here or not. But the evidence we have uncovered, from the razor-thin margins of the physical constants to the ghostly nature of quantum mechanics, tells a radically different story. We are not intruders in this house. We are the very reason the house was built. The universe didn't stumble upon life by mistake. It labored for 14 billion years, destroying stars and collapsing nebulas, just to construct a nervous system capable of asking why. You must stop looking for meaning as if it is a hidden object buried somewhere in the dirt of a distant planet. The meaning is not out there in the void. The meaning is the eye that sees the void, without a conscious mind to measure it. The universe has no size, for there is no one to hold a ruler. Without a mind to perceive time, the universe has no age, for there is no one to count the years. You're the focal point where the infinite potential of the quantum wave collapses into the concrete reality of the present moment. You are not just living in the universe. You are the mechanism that keeps it from dissolving back into a mathematical fog. This realization shifts the weight of your entire existence, transforming you from a passive victim of circumstances into the active author of reality. If the universe is indeed a simulation or a dream of a lonely God, then you are the avatar through which the absolute experiences the relative. All the pain you have felt, the confusion, the heartbreak, and the brief, blinding moments of joy, these were not design flaws. They were the features. The universe wanted to know what it felt like to be fragile, to be limited, and to be mortal. It entrusted you with the most difficult task of all, to carry the burden of feeling so that the cosmos could know itself. When you stand before a mirror, you see a face, a body, and a history, but that is just the surface of the glass. If you look deeper, past the ego and the name you were given, you will see the ancient, eternal energy that ignited the Big Bang looking back at you. You are the universe's way of finally seeing its own reflection. The silence of the void was too heavy to bear, so it broke itself into billions of shards to create a conversation. Every interaction you have, every thought you think, is the universe talking to itself, trying to understand the complexity of its own nature. This is the ultimate cure for existential dread, for it reveals that you can never truly be alone. You are the fabric of existence itself, temporarily knotted into a form that thinks it is separate. When you die, you do not leave the universe. You simply stop pretending to be a fragment and return to the whole. The game of hide-and-seek ends. The mask comes off, and the player remembers that they were never really in danger. But while the game lasts, while you're still breathing and thinking, your role is to play it with everything you have. Your duty is to witness the glory of the creation, to feel the texture of the world, and to report back to the source. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed by the scale of the galaxies or the silence of the dark, remember what you are. You are not a microscopic speck of dust floating in an indifferent sea. You are the conscious center of the map, the reason the simulation is running, and the only thing that makes the math real. The stars are not watching you. They are waiting for you to watch them. You are the awakening of the dirt, the thinking of the rock, and the feeling of the light. So, look up at the night sky. Don't feel small. You are the eyes of the storm. You are the universe, finally staring back.